at age 34, you had how many eggs?
I was able to retrieve 18.
18. And then at age 40, you had?
9.
Okay. So half the number of eggs. And that is fairly consistent with data that we have, where we know that there is a pretty steep drop-off in the number of healthy eggs or your chance of having a pregnancy as you get older. So 20s is like optimal fertility, and people who want you to freeze your eggs will tell you that actually 20s is the best time to freeze your eggs. And then into your 30s, you're still pretty good. And then after about 37, 38, the drop-off becomes very quick. Welcome back to another episode of Unplanned Parent. I'm Angelica Rompal, known affectionately as Dr. Angel to my patients. Today, I'm joined by my strategically impulsive, crypto-curious, and calmly panicked co-host and brother, Raman, and a very special guest, Ashley. For those of you new to Unplanned Parent, Ashley and Raman have been friends for years, and together they are planning to platonically co-parent a baby with Ashley's egg and Raman's sperm. So Ashley, welcome. So excited that you're finally here, and our audience is going to get to hear from you because we've really only heard Raman's perspective on all of this. And first of all, congratulations. At the time of this recording, you are pregnant.
I'm 22 weeks pregnant, so almost 5 months. We're basically over
5 months. It was 4 like 3 days ago.
So here we've got Raman, my brother, who's the dad, and Ashley, you're the mom. You guys have a baby in your belly, 5 months pregnant, but the baby was made with your egg from 10 years ago and Raman's sperm from like 6 months ago. So can you walk us back to 34-year-old Ashley and tell us what was going on in your head, what you were thinking, how you were feeling, and why you decided to freeze your eggs?
Yeah, and I kind of want to know, like, were your friends doing it? Was this something that everyone was doing back in the 2000s?
Back in the 2000s. No, that's going to lead me to a great point as well. Feel free to interrupt me with any questions, but yeah, 34-year-old Ashley, I had just ended a relationship, and the older you get, the older you want that relationship to be the one. And that's kind of what you always kind of enter it hoping. So that relationship had just ended. My best friend is about 4 years older than I am. So at the time she was 38 years old, and she had gone to the doctor about a year before, and just to test to see how she was doing with babies and fertility. She was getting married. The doctor told her, "You're looking great. You've got all the time in the world." And side note, I don't think any doctor should ever tell that to any patient, no matter however old they are. And so once they were married, they were trying to have kids, and she was having a really tough time, and nothing was working out. So she went back to the doctor, did the same tests, did all the fertility checks. And the doctor basically said, yeah, your tests are, I don't know exactly what they looked at, but basically was like, yeah, it's a lot different than it was the last time we checked, and you're going to have a hard time.
Wow. So that drop off happened for her dramatically at around age 37, 38, between 37 and 39, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're saying at age 37, she didn't freeze her eggs at that point?
No, that wasn't a consideration for her at that point. No, her doctor told her everything was great. She was getting married. She was at the highlight of her life, and she was like, she knew she was going to try to have kids right away. But her doctor said she had time.
Wow, that really sucks. So what ended up happening with her?
So she ended up going through the egg retrieval IVF process. I think she had like 8 eggs. She ended up having 1 solid embryo. And by miracle, that 1 embryo ended up with a beautiful daughter. So all great, but watching her story really was a wake-up call for me. And it made me do a lot of reflection of what I want to do. And I did some more research, and it was no secret to me that egg quality decreases as you get older into your 30s. So I decided to take action into my own hands. And, I had her as an inspiration, and selfishly, I didn't want to be that. I really did want kids. So I had a consult at the local fertility center in San Diego.
So let me ask you. You, I think, like many women who are in their early 30s or mid 30s, and are not with a partner that they think is going to be a father for their future child, think about this. Not everyone has the ability to do it. How did you know going into it that you were financially able to th- how did you think about the finances of all this, and take me through that too?
Yeah, and I know you work for a really good company, Ashley. Did that kind of influence your decision as well?
No, I mean, that affected my decision later on. But when I did this at 34, there was no company benefits to freezing my eggs at all. It cost about $10,000. Um, and I've fortunately, I've just always been a saver. I, always have money that I put away for special things, and this was important enough to me to utilize those funds for this. So, when I went to have my consult, they actually told me, I don't know if this is still the case, but they said that you'll actually get a price discount if you freeze your eggs before you turn 35. So that was even just a little bit of extra motivation. So, I went in and did my consult. They did the ultrasound. They look at my follicles and everything just to see if it was viable for me to have kids, and everything looked good. And then I had the consult with the doctor, and the doctor told me a few things that tell every single person. I've probably told this over 100 times to people, even considering freezing their eggs. He said, if you go through this process, this isn't, don't come running to me for when you want to use these eggs. This isn't, you're 34, you still probably have time. Like, don't come running to me to use these eggs. This is for because you're 34 and you haven't had the person, and might be for your second kid or your third kid, because that will maybe be when you need the extra help. And to be honest, I have friends right now that had no problem having their first kid, but now they're a little bit older and they're struggling having their second kid. So that was really the main motivator for me to do this, because I wasn't dating anybody at the time. And then he also said, which was helpful, even though it wasn't a main subjective or a main picture for me, but he said, we talk a lot about women's fertility and how women's fertility declines, but nearly half the time it's the man. And if you're with somebody who has fertility problems, you are going to have to maybe go through this process anyway. So those were the two things that he said that really resonated with me. And I took that to heart. And that's kind of how I went through with it.
Thank you for sharing that. And just to clarify, what he's saying is if you ended up with a partner later in life who had male factor infertility, you would still need to retrieve your eggs to do this intracytoplasmic injection of that sperm into your egg. So it's not like it's, you might end up, chances were, if you had an older partner, you might end up still going through the physical egg retrieval process anyway. So you might as well do it when you're younger, while you have more chance of having healthier eggs through the retrieval and freezing process. Am I getting that?
Yeah, it is. And I wouldn't even say older partner. I mean, that is a factor, but men have fertility issues, I think, at any age sometimes, depending on the man. So yeah, I think it was all the factors. Yeah.
That's actually a great point. You're right.
And were you thinking of charging whoever was the father like $5,000 to pay for half that bill?
I don't know.
Just a
Rama,
question I had.
do you want to owe me $5,000? Have I sent you that bill yet?
I didn't get the Venmo request, so I didn't know where that was going.
Yeah.
So then, okay, so you had your consults, you got good information, you decided you were going to move forward with this egg retrieval process. Can you walk us through exactly what that means? Like, are you taking pills? Are you giving yourself shots? Where are you giving yourself shots? How often? And what happens?
So it was interesting. I mean, this is kind of a side note, but this was a big part of my journey and a big part of my health today. Is I had gone to my general practitioner doctor like 6 months earlier, not feeling well, not doing well, did a bunch of tests. The doctor came back and said, yeah, you've got something called Hashimoto's. No idea what that meant. And they're like, yeah, we're not going to give you anything, but that's what you have, and send you on your merry way. And I mean, not that I wanted them to give me a bunch of pills, but I was like, okay, well, at least I have a diagnosis. I know why I'm feeling bad. And we'll go on. So once I did the egg freezing process, the first step was they did a bunch of blood work. And the doctor said, your TSH, which is my thyroid, is way too high, and we need that to come down. So I went back to my primary care doctor, who didn't want to put me on any meds before, and told her why I needed to be on a TSH, a thyroid medication. She put me on it, and I was kind of floored. I was like, whoa, life is supposed to be like this? Like, this is what life is? Brain fog disappeared. I wasn't napping anymore. Like, it just was a whole new world. So I also attribute this whole egg freezing process to kind of really getting my Hashimoto's journey, like, treated and underway. So that's just kind of a sidebar. But once I
No,
had the blood,
that's a really important sidebar. I just want to chime in that Hashimoto's is an autoimmune process when your body starts kind of fighting against your thyroid gland, and then you are low on your thyroid hormone, and then the medication that you have to take is just a replacement thyroid hormone, often called synthroid or levothyroxine, and it makes a world of difference. And wow, you must have felt so much better because you probably had more energy, you were less constipated, your skin, your hair, all of that came probably improved because your thyroid hormone is so important in managing your metabolism and your overall energy level and how so many bodily functions. So that's amazing that you had to go through the egg freezing process or the testing prior to that to learn that.
In conjunction with probably not partying as much because you were prepping your body, that probably helped with the mental clarity.
it was a little different than that. It was definitely a little bit different than that. But yeah, I definitely the brain fog was something that was unbelievable. Like I would just walk into a room, and especially with my work, I would walk in and have a conversation, and my brain would just, I had no words would come out of my mouth. It just wasn't me. So it was a very interesting time. But my primary care doctor just didn't want to put me on meds because it's a lifelong thing. And she didn't want to start that. So once I was forced to start that through the egg freezing, it kind of changed my life in that sense. So but yeah, and then so after my labs were good, my TSH was down, that took a few months, continued to do more blood work. And then I believe they put me on birth control because they want to make sure they regulate my cycle and they know when I'm ovulating and all that stuff. So, and I think I had to call them on a certain day, and I had all these medications that I needed to take. I think there was 2 shots that I needed to take for a significant, like for about a week or 2.
So, can you walk us through exactly what it was like in the few weeks leading up to your egg retrieval? Did you take pills? Did you have shots? Did you have to go into the doctor's office every day, every week? What happened?
Yeah, I mean, it is a very time-consuming process, personally, and you just have to dedicate your time and space and energy to the process. So, there's definitely, I started on birth control. There was lots of ultrasounds. There was blood work. I did have shots that I needed to take that they were not intimidating at all. I did about 2 to 3 weeks worth of shots, and then there was just a strict protocol of medications you have to take. So there were some oral pills, some shots, and at the very end, I would just do ultrasounds and go into the office every 3 days so that they could look at my ovaries, look at how my eggs are doing, and just see when I was actually ready for the procedure. And then the night before the procedure, they gave me something called a trigger shot, and I upped my medication. And then the next day, I went in for my procedure.
Wow. So you were giving yourself shots in your belly every
Yeah,
day
my belly.
or
Correct. Yes.
and were they every day or every couple days or
It
how
was
was the spacing?
every evening. It was about at least 2 shots in my belly every evening. And I had to do it about the same time for about 2 to 3 weeks.
For 2 to 3 weeks until they gave you your trigger shot.
Correct.
So during this process, were you able to go to work? Were you able to be a functional, normal human? Were you able to start there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. Because as we all know, as females, hormones can take control of you, whether you want it to or not. And even though I'm a very self-aware person, and I didn't want to put myself into any extra situations where I might be hormonal, or I might, if situations might affect me. So, I definitely went to work. I felt good going to work. But I did stay home a little bit more than usual. I wasn't maybe in my social environments as much, maybe hibernated a little bit more in those 2 to 3 weeks, because I just didn't want anything to really set me off or do something that I wasn't normally going to do that wasn't me. And I'm just very ultra aware of that. So, I definitely did stay home a little bit more.
And how were you feeling physically? How were you feeling mentally, emotionally? And were you sharing this journey with anyone, or was it all private?
I'm an open book, so I definitely shared it with a lot of people. I felt good because I did stay home. I think if I stretched myself too thin, it could have been a little bit, but my my neighbor actually gave me it was kind of very symbolic. My neighbor was leaving town and had a cocoon on a board, and she's like, "I'm leaving town. This is gonna bloom in the next week, and I'm not gonna see it." And it was kind of the week that I was staying home, and I thought it was very symbolic because I literally like stayed home and like watched this cocoon come home a butterfly. Might be kind of cheesy, but it was very symbolic of my journey. The timing was kind of fun. But yeah, I definitely shared it also with a lot of my friends. And because I did this, I actually have quite a few friends that froze their eggs as well. So it, I I'm very open about, and I've always wanted to do like, egg freezing parties where people can come and just learn more about it, because I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, you never told me about this back in the day, or invited me to an
I
egg freezing
probably did. I
party.
think you did. Yeah, I think you knew I was doing this. You just don't remember.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't like very important to me at the moment, um, or just maybe it was too abstract of a thought.
Yeah. And so when you did at 34, you did your egg retrievals, and then you did it at 40. And how were those two processes different in terms of like how you felt, where your emotions were, and also just how many eggs you ended up being able to retrieve at 34 versus 40?
And most importantly, is why do it again?
Yeah, so when I was 40, I get that question a lot, like why would you do it again? Because when I was 34, I retrieved 19 eggs. 18 of those eggs were frozen. But as my story, or as I talk to more people, 18 eggs can be nothing at the end of the day. And people don't realize that. Once the egg is matched with the sperm and with through all the processes that they go through, it can just whittle away every time. So I have so many friends that have done IVF like 5, 6 times, and they never got like one solid embryo. Or if they got one, it didn't take. So in my mind, 18 did sound high, but it wasn't high. No number is too high, to be honest. And I worked for a very great company that offers really good medical benefits. Cheers to California
Do you
that
want to name
now.
them?
You want to give him a shout out?
I don't think I need to, but I work for a major medical device company. And I think, shout out to California, actually, that now it's a requirement for major employers to cover some of the infertility benefits. I don't know the details, but I think that's a very big thing for California to do in helping women in this process. So my company pays for a lot of these benefits. And so when I looked into it, it was going to cost me $1,000 to freeze my eggs again. And well, the first time was about $10,000. And in my mind, $1,000 was nothing to just have a little bit of extra security to have more eggs in the bank. And I always knew that it wasn't a guarantee that any of these eggs would work anyway, or that I'd even need to use them. But it was just always a little bit of a security that I had in the back of my head. So when I was 40, most of the process was the same. I believe in the beginning, they had me take estrase and a testosterone gel, which was different than when I was 34. I don't know if that's just because protocols changed or because it was because I was older. But from what I recall, that was really the only major difference in my two protocols. And then after my retrieval, I did get less, which is no surprise. I got 12 total eggs, and 9 of those were frozen. So the first time I got 18 at 34. Then when I was 40, I got 9. So I got half the number. And so in total, I had 27 eggs.
Wow. Okay. And how were you feeling emotionally at this time? Were you like, man, I still haven't found a dude or whatever? I still feel super young. Like, where was your head?
I mean, my head was still hopeful. Like, obviously, you always want to find your person, and there was just an extra security. Um, I still dating, still trying to find the person that you would want to be with. So it was never, it was kind of an interesting conversation when you're dating guys because they were like, oh, you're 40, 42, like you can't have, you're older for kids. And it's like, well, I've got some 34-year-old eggs in the freezer, so you don't really have to worry about that. Or that's a plus. So it makes up for interesting conversations when you're dating. But I was always and am very open about it, and to talking about it because I think it should be talked about more. I think when you hear of women having kids later in life, like kids in their 40s, yes, some women have them naturally, and that is amazing and that's great. But a lot is what is not talked about is the journey to have the kids in the 40s. And people don't realize that some people do freeze their eggs when they're younger, and that's why they're having kids in their 40s.
Did you ever was there ever a time in your life where you were like, you know what, maybe I just don't want kids, and if, quote unquote, Mr. Right isn't there, maybe this wasn't meant to be?
That thought never crossed my mind because I was always hopeful that I was going to find my person and have kids with them, which I still am. I'm still, having kids this way, which I know you and I have talked about, was never on my radar. It was never in my plan. It was never.
Hey, it was never in my plan either.
Yes, exactly.
I want to ask another question about, doing it once and then doing it again. Did you, and you're such an open book, did you ever encounter any naysayers, anyone who made you feel maybe wasn't as supportive in about what you were doing?
I mean, not to my face. No, I think
Oh,
every single
that's great.
person has been so supportive. And I, like I said, I have a lot of friends that have froze their eggs because I did. I kind of inspired them to do it. And I feel great in that. And I think more people should if they can afford it. And, I talk to some people and some of my friends, and they're like, oh, fertility issues don't run in my family. I'll be fine. And, I don't comment on that, but I just don't agree with that. And then
Yeah, you just
some
tell them
people,
what aging does.
yeah. And then some people you're like, oh, I can't afford it. And then they go and get their nails done and buy a $3,000 dog. Like that's their priority. But, in my opinion, having a child and had security, and even though it's not a guaranteed security, was very important to me, and it was worth spending the money on. And there are finance programs available. Like I know my clinic had a, payment plan. So if you couldn't afford it, you could do a payment plan. So, I think I didn't encounter any naysayers. And I think everybody in my life knows that I froze my eggs.
Ashley, thank you so much for sharing all of that. We will continue this conversation as we transition over to our medical breakdown. So you brought up some interesting uh, parts of your own personal history that I didn't know, that you are hypothyroid, meaning you have low thyroid. That was discovered during your retrieval process. And I think it's important for everyone to know that replacing thyroid hormone isn't just about feeling good, it's about maintaining normal, healthy functions in your body. There are some hormones, like if your kid is short and because they are growth hormone deficient, if you don't give them growth hormone, they won't be tall. but they will still grow and develop somewhat. I mean, they will not grow in height, but the rest of them will develop fine. If your kid is hypothyroid and you don't give them thyroid hormone, they can have severe problems, including severe mental disabilities, retardation, developmental delays. So, thyroid hormone, I don't think of as something that you can just wait on because it's a long-term medication. I do think everyone should have a serious conversation about thyroid hormone if someone tells you you're hypothyroid or you're becoming hypothyroid, because it is a process. It doesn't happen necessarily overnight. So it's something that requires monitoring. My own daughter right now has antibodies against her thyroid gland. And so that doesn't mean she needs to start thyroid medication right now, but it does mean that we need to monitor her regularly so that if she does become hypothyroid, low thyroid, that we replace that thyroid hormone right away, because she's a growing girl. So thyroid for a kid actually affects their growth of their height, their brain, like everything. Because like I was saying, thyroid is involved in a lot of your body. Also, if you're hypothyroid, that can affect your fertility. So I think, again, just thyroid hormones are important. It's a discussion you can have with your doctor.
Is Hashimoto's generally easy to manage or difficult? Because I feel like I know quite a few people with it, and one friend in particular seems to have struggled managing it, and most people seem to, this is just anecdotal evidence, and most people seem to be managing it just fine and don't really even think about it.
Well, I think there are always more difficult situations with conditions. Hashimoto's is the process. It's the thyroiditis. It's the inflammation of your thyroid gland that's happening when your body's starting to create a lot of these antibodies. And I'm simplifying this a lot, and it's not my area of expertise, but I've managed a lot of patients that have had Hashimoto's and then gone on to become, generally after that, you become hypothyroid, low thyroid, because now your thyroid gland no longer functions. But during the process, you can have some ups and downs. And so, yes, that can be hard if it's not a clear cut like decline in your thyroid gland, but more. Uh, uh, a less predictable trajectory, then yes, it can become difficult to manage. And generally, these are managed by endocrinologists. So I'm sure, Ashley, you had to see an endocrinologist at some point.
Yes, I actually didn't see one until this process, until the
Oh,
IVF
interesting.
process.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, in pediatrics, we generally send kids that are dealing with low thyroid function to the endocrinologist, but it might be so common in adult medicine, or some adult practitioners might feel comfortable enough managing it. Or Ashley might have been at the end point where she was just so low on thyroid that it was very clear what she had to do. And I think also if you're working with a fertility specialist, they also are essentially endocrinologists and work with endocrine doctors are hormone specialists.
So is this something that we need to be hyper vigilant with the kid? Like, is it something that gets genetically passed down? Is it, or we just kind of just go with the flow and see what happens?
Yeah, no, it is something that you should be watching, and it's all great questions. So first of all, it's really important during pregnancy because fetal development can be affected by any thyroid imbalances. So I'm sure your doctors, Ashley, have been watching your thyroid hormone throughout your pregnancy, and every woman's, it's standard labs during your prenatal care to have your thyroid hormone tested, or your TSH, which is a measure of your thyroid hormone. Ashley mentioned her TSH earlier, and so that is usually monitored if you have any history of thyroid problems, or if during your prenatal screening, your TSH is abnormal. If your TSH is abnormal, then they would do further, more specific thyroid hormone tests and replace thyroid hormone as needed, or give you medicines to block thyroid hormone production if you are making too much thyroid. It's the perfect balance of thyroid hormone that you need. And then Raman, you had another question. Oh, and for a baby.
Yeah, for like, does this something that passes down genetically? Do we not know?
It can be passed. It can be hereditary. So, yeah, it's something that we would watch in kids. It is tested on the newborn screen. There is a thing called congenital hypothyroidism, where you're born hypothyroid, and that is a must to detect very early because, as I was saying, it's really critical for brain development. And if babies are not treated immediately, if they are born hypothyroid, that can result in severe, uh, I don't like to use the word retardation because people not in medicine find the term offensive, but as a medical term, it just affects, like, I can just say not having thyroid hormone can affect brain development in a very detrimental way. So that's different than what Ashley has. So in your case, like, yeah, if your kid becomes like super constipated and not growing at age 8 or 10, we would check the TSH or at any point in the kid's life. It's a standard lab to check if a child is not growing well, because thyroid hormone is so important for growth.
So this isn't something that would have been caught, like when the embryo is being tested, or when my sperm or her egg is being tested, or our own background genetic testing. I guess maybe in that.
No. Well, I don't know if there's a specific gene. No, it's not. Nothing is as clear cut as like Mendelian genetics. It's not like there's one gene, as far as I know, for hypothyroidism. So, but yes, it is hereditary. Like if you tell me, if I have a patient who's not growing well, who's feeling really tired, who's really constipated, whose skin is getting dry, whose mom and grandma have a history of hypothyroidism, I'm not going to think twice about checking that child's thyroid hormone. So it is hereditary, but we don't have, very few things have like a single gene that's like, oh, this is the point, you carry that. So that's, I think, a little, sorry, does that sound rude? There are very few things that are so clear cut and Mendelian in medicine as we like to think. Another thing we want to talk about, just really quick in our medical breakdown, is the drop off that Ashley alluded to in her own story, where at age 34 you had how many eggs?
I was able to retrieve 18.
18, and then at age 40 you had
9.
Okay. So half the number of eggs, and that is fairly consistent with data that we have, where we know that there is a pretty steep drop off in the number of healthy eggs or your chance of having a pregnancy as you get older. So 20s is like optimal fertility, and people who want you to freeze your eggs will tell you that actually 20s is the best time to freeze your eggs. And then into your 30s, you're still pretty good. And then after about 37, 38, the drop off becomes very quick. And of course, in some women more than others. And some women can still retrieve eggs into their early 40s or even mid 40s. But after that, it's super, super tough.
Yeah, well, I think what might be important for viewers to know too is, you get these eggs, and in Ashley's case, 27. What is the typical success rate out of 27 eggs? I'm sure this is like not an easy ballpark question to answer, but it is interesting.
Yeah, and I don't there have been studies on this, in certain there have been studies. The number, I don't think it's, I can't answer that, but I will tell you that, as Ashley is saying, there are people that have tons of eggs and do not, and result with a live pregnancy, and some people who have 1 or 2 embryos and somehow, magically end up with a healthy baby. So there's so many individual factors involved in this.
So what I do think would be interesting for viewers out there is, what percentage of Ashley's eggs would ballpark produce a healthy embryo? In her case, she had 27. I don't think there is a clear, easy answer to that, but I don't know what that unclear answer is.
And then I'll tell you what my doctor told me when I was going through the process. And this is when we were trying to figure out, do I use all my 27 eggs? Do I just do half of them? Do I just do my first batch when I was 34? And she highly recommended that. She's like, I would do all 27. And she said, because there's about 6 stages, and with each 6 stages you lose about 50% of your eggs, or even when it's mashed up with the sperm. So when she did the math, she's like, you're probably going to get about 2 to 4 embryos from those 27 eggs. And we ended up getting 5.
Yeah, so I think it's just important for listeners to know that eggs are more fragile than embryos, and then those embryos have to go through the testing and get implanted into the uterus. And at every stage of the process, there is attrition, meaning you lose some of the initial eggs you started with. So that's why a lot of doctors recommend having more rather than less. And there are so many individual factors. I've read studies where there are women that had like 80 eggs and no babies because it just didn't work out. So I agree with what Ashley said earlier, is no doctor should ever tell a woman that she's all set because everything looks perfect, because you don't know until you have that baby in hand that everything was hunky dory.
And I will add one more thing that, I wasn't in the situation to do this, but if you are able to freeze an embryo versus an egg, there is less viable chance of that embryo becoming a live birth than freezing an egg and making an embryo.
I think it's time we move on to,
Is this normal?
is this normal? So a lot of people are freezing their eggs. So is it normal? It's getting to be more and more normal, especially if you live in a state that supports fertility treatments for women like California or New York.
So is having an IVF baby normal?
It's getting to be more normal too. There are about 14 to 18 million IVF babies worldwide. So, yeah, I would say we're getting toward normal for that.
And do we know of these IVF babies, like, are the outcomes similar to natural babies? And there's probably a lot of variables, but just in general.
In general, babies that were born through assisted reproductive technologies are as healthy as babies conceived naturally. So while there are some studies that show a little bit of this or a little bit of that, I think the general consensus is it's a very safe and healthy way to have a baby if you live in a place and have the resources for that to happen. But I think this is a perfect segue for stuff you didn't know. Perfect. I wanted to talk about the first IVF baby. I think this is such an interesting story. The first IVF baby was in the United Kingdom in 1978. And when she was 6 weeks old, someone made a documentary about her. And this was how the world was introduced to IVF in a way that they accepted it. Because prior to that, people were really anti. The people that were studying fertility technologies weren't getting grant money. It was really hard for them to get funding from their university. So these doctors were at Cambridge. Cambridge didn't want to give them the funding until 2 babies were born and they were both healthy. And then all of a sudden, whoop, everyone was willing to provide funding and do more of this research. And one of those doctors, I have his name here, Robert Edwards. He was one of the doctors who made this first IVF baby. Louise Brown was her name, and he helped bring her to life, and he won the Nobel Prize for it in 2010. That's crazy because she was born in 1978. So I thought that was pretty fun stuff you didn't know.
Maybe they wanted to make sure she lived to age whatever, 32.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder.
That was like
where is she now?
Yeah, that'd be interesting. That actually brings up something that I wanted to talk about is, going through this process with Ashley and getting so much genetic testing done, like through these phases and like our blood work testing. Is it possible that people who wanted a natural baby would have better outcomes just going the IVF route if they can pick the best egg, pick the best sperm, or because that's what the doctor would, like Dr. Park for us was telling us. She's going to go through all my millions of sperm and pick the very best one, the one that looks the best, most handsome. Yeah, I mean, it's what it sounded like.
I think if you, I think this is a very nuanced question, because I think if you had a couple that had known recessive genes that could result in life-threatening condition or a baby that wasn't going to make it to term, then yeah, and people do that for that reason. Couples that can naturally conceive will go through fertility procedures if they know they have something like that in their background, which is why when you're at a gynecologist's office, there are brochures for genetic testing all over. Ashley, I'm sure you have seen those. So yeah, I think there's a role for that. But in terms of if everyone just did IVF, would we have healthier babies? I think that's a really loaded question because I think we're going to have to bring on a fertility specialist and to have a deeper dive into that. But with that, thank you, Ashley, for being on this show. And I think we'll have you on for a couple more shows to learn a little bit more about your story and hear your perspective and not just Rumman's the whole time.
Thank you. It's been fun.
All right. Thank you for joining us on The Unplanned Parent. So if you found this episode helpful or even just a little bit interesting, we'd really appreciate it if you could take a moment to rate and review the show. I know it sounds like a small thing, but it genuinely makes a huge difference in helping other parents or people planning to become parents find us. And it's a big boost to my ego. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.